Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. I do want to switch gears and just talk about just a fascinating college basketball recruiting story that has come up over the last couple days. And I think if you're listening this far into the podcast, if you found this video on YouTube, however you're consuming this segment of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, you probably know all the details, but it's a player named G.G. Jackson, widely regarded as probably the best high school basketball player in the class of 2023. Obviously, there's some talk that maybe DJ Wagner is the number one player, but G.G. Jackson is right there. He's the number one player according to 24/7 Sports. And we got a mega recruiting update on this kid who, again, probably the number one high school player in the class of 2023, which means that he is set to be a senior next year. He was committed to the University of North Carolina. You've probably heard of the Tar Heels, reigning national runners-up, lost to Kansas in the title game. They're going to be really good next year. He was committed going into his senior year to the Carolina Tar Heels. Just one problem. On Thursday night, he became the first player ever to decommit from North Carolina, and more interestingly, it seems as though multiple reports seem to indicate that he already knows where he's going next and on an accelerated timeline. He is reportedly, I think Travis Branham has been all over this story from 24/7 Sports. He is reportedly set to announce that he is going to South Carolina. Here is the twist, though. On top of going to South Carolina, he is a South Carolina native. He is also going to reclassify into the class of 2022, enroll this fall shortly after Peach Jam. He will be a South Carolina Gamecock. So that last part isn't official yet. He did decommit on Thursday. The South Carolina element is expected in the coming days. But let me just say this. I'm going to give you all the details. But this is a fascinating story because, one, you have an elite high school player that could be playing college basketball this coming season. But here's where it's interesting. Why is he making the decision? There's some interesting details that you need to know. And frankly, reclassifying, going to a school with not a lot of talent around him, I don't think this is probably the best decision for him. So let's get into it. I kind of just gave you the background, but what I would tell you overall about this kid, first of all, really talented player. As I said, I think I said it, 6'8" forward, really athletic, can shoot the ball, step back. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Paul George, maybe, like just super athletic wing guy. But just a fascinating recruitment that has seemingly been between North Carolina and South Carolina from the beginning. He is from Columbia, not far from the University of South Carolina, but last fall visited North Carolina during, I believe it was essentially their Midnight Madness event. He was expected to be a Carolina lean, but then as time went on, the buzz increased that he would eventually end up at South Carolina and that this part of the equation, that the reclassification would be on the table. Then, of course, we know what happened at South Carolina. Frank Martin gets fired, and all of a sudden his recruitment opens back up, and Carolina not only takes the lead, but on top of Carolina taking the lead, he actually announces that he is going to North Carolina in the class of 2023. What's especially interesting, there were all those reclassification rumors with South Carolina, but he seemingly wasn't interested at all in reclassifying to go to North Carolina. He said publicly he wasn't ready. He said he was happy to be in the class of 2023. He was committed to the Tar Heels. And so the question now becomes, what has happened that he has decided that he's not only going to flip his commitment, but also he is going to reclassify just weeks after saying that he had no interest in reclassifying? And I think it's important to note, by the way, my understanding is North Carolina would have happily taken him this year. They had an open scholarship after Kerwin Walton transferred, but he said he wasn't interested. And so they went after Pete Nance to transfer from Northwestern. So why? Now I feel like I'm Brian Windhorst in the meme. Why did he tell North Carolina a few weeks ago that he was not interested in reclassifying? Now he decommits and he's about to go to South Carolina. Part of it is, yes, maybe it's part of the coaching change, but I think it's much more. And let's get into that part because I think that part is fascinating. Why decommit? Why reclassify? Why South Carolina? Well, what's especially interesting, and one thing that I know, following recruiting as long as I have, it is that in general, when something crazy happens in recruiting, there's usually an adult behind the scenes, sometimes multiple adults, involved in the decision-making process. That's why a lot of times you just see crazy stuff or back and forth or can't decide on a school. A lot of times there's an adult involved, and we now have like official reports that this is going on. So as I mentioned, Travis Branham did a really good job reporting on this story. He posted something on Thursday before the official decommitment. Here is part of what he said about this whole crazy recruitment. He said, second, and what has proven to be the most crucial, was the fact that others behind the scenes have strongly wanted to see Jackson stay at home and play for South Carolina, while others just wanted him to enroll early, regardless of destination. And so what you clearly have here is a kid who is conflicted between schools and whether he's actually ready or not. And the one thing that I will say, the one thing that I have on record, this is not me reading message boards, even though I think it's been on the message boards. It does seem as though his mom, who obviously lives in South Carolina, does want him to be a Gamecock. My understanding is when he committed to North Carolina, she did not show up at the press conference. She is at least one of the adults pushing behind the scenes to get him to South Carolina. And then according to this Travis Branham report from 24/7 Sports, it appears as though there's others that just want him into the class of 2022 so he can be draft eligible a year early. So you have a kid. He seemingly wants to go to North Carolina. He seemingly wanted to go there in 2023, wanted to enjoy his senior year, but instead, the adults in his life, this is per a report from 24/7 Sports, some are pulling him to South Carolina, some are pulling him to reclassify, and this is the sad part to me, and I know shouldn't feel too bad for a kid that frankly is probably a year away from being a millionaire NBA draft pick. I do feel bad for him, and I do wonder, based on the reports, based on what I've heard, based on the clear confusion about the back and forth of who he's committed to and when he's going to commit and how long he's going to commit and when he's going to show up on campus, I do wonder if anybody really has this kid's best interest at heart. Because here's the bottom line. First of all, you can never go wrong with staying in high school longer and slowing down your development. Now, some guys are ready, and we're going to get into all the reclassification stuff in a minute. But I remember talking to somebody close to Paolo Banchero a few years ago. And what they told me was Paolo could have reclassified, but we told him, trust the process, stay the course. We want you to finish out high school. We want you to be a kid. We want you to go to college. And then when you're ready to be a pro, be a pro. Well, I think it worked out pretty well for Paolo Banchero. He is the number one overall pick in the draft. And so when I look at this kid, when I look at this Gigi Jackson situation, what I am concerned about, why I don't believe that it is the best decision for him, is because it really brings together the confluence of two things that we have seen in high school basketball recruiting that generally just do not work out well for the player involved. Now, maybe he's the exception to the rule, but what do they say about the exception to the rule? The exception, everybody believes they're the exception. There is an exception to every rule, but the exception also proves the rule. And I do worry about him because I do think two conflicting things are happening in his recruitment. First of all, one, what I would say is historically, reclassifications just generally don't work unless you are on a really, really, really loaded team. And then on top of that, it also doesn't work whether you're reclassifying or not in general. If you're a high school basketball star, it just generally doesn't work going to an inferior team that doesn't have talent around you, which I hate to say it, South Carolina fans, but it's kind of the truth in this case. In terms of the reclassifications, it was funny. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I was thinking about them, and really in terms of the best ones that have worked out, and maybe I missed one or two. But the best ones that have worked out probably were actually 5, 6, 7 years ago at this point, and they were really talented players that went to really good situations with other really good players. Karl Anthony Towns actually reclassified, ends up at Kentucky, that loaded team with Willie Cauley-Stein, Devin Booker, the Harrison twins, etc. He ends up being the number one pick in the draft. Not too much is put on his shoulders. He's awesome at Kentucky, but they don't need him to be everything. A couple years later, it was the same with Marvin Bagley. Reclassified, goes to Duke. He's awesome, but he had a bunch of NBA talent around him. He played with Gary Trent, who's playing really well in the NBA. He played with Wendell Carter, who's playing really well in the NBA. And Marvin Bagley it worked out really well for. There's a lot of reclassified kids, though, where it didn't work out. There was obviously Anthony Edwards. He reclassified, goes to Georgia. Clearly, he had individual success, but the team really struggled. There were guys that went to good teams but just weren't good enough. Devin Askew at Kentucky, we all know how that worked out. Christian Lander at Indiana, we all know how that worked out. He barely played and after 2 years just transferred to Western Kentucky. Amani Bates, we all know how that one worked out. Did not work out well. He just transferred to Eastern Michigan. But beyond just the reclassifying to a school that doesn't really have a lot of talent around you, just think about all the other guys who have thought, I'm going to be the guy that does the different school thing, this and that, and how it just works out for them in general. Anthony Edwards, I just mentioned. I don't think any of us realized how good Anthony Edwards was because he played for such a bad college team that was so poorly coached. Now, maybe part of it was Tom Crean. But Anthony Edwards now, I don't even think there's a debate. He's one of the top 25 players in the NBA right now. Averaged 19 as a rookie, averaged 21 this past year, got Minnesota to the playoffs, gave Memphis fits. Anthony Edwards was a star, but we didn't see it because he went to Georgia. The team around him stunk, the coaching stunk, and we had no idea how good he was. Markelle Fultz, obviously draft-wise it worked out, but missed the NCAA tournament at Washington. Ben Simmons, he put up historic numbers. I know it's easy to crush Ben Simmons now. I've done it on this podcast. But he put up historic numbers in his 1 year at LSU, and it didn't matter. By the end of the year, he was ready to get out. They were ready for him to leave, and it was just a disaster. And so that's what I worry about with Gigi Jackson. The reclassification thing rarely works, and I think he's a really, really talented player. But he's still only 17 years old as we speak. He'll be 18 this year. He'll be 19 next year, which will make him draft eligible in 2023. That's why he's deciding to reclassify. But I look at the whole situation. I think he's really good. I don't think he's good enough to go to South Carolina, which has by far, I don't know about by far, but it has the least talent, in my opinion, in the SEC next year. Now, they added a couple of nice pieces through the portal. They added Michi Johnson from Ohio State. They added a couple guys. I don't believe that they have the talent around him, though, to put him in the position to succeed, especially as a 17, soon-to-be 18-year-old who is going to be asked to be the face of the program, carry the program. Every media opportunity is going to be about him. He's going to be arriving late on campus, which I think is a factor as well. I don't know if he's good enough to handle all of that on an inferior roster. Now, you put him on Carolina, even if he had reclassified this year. You're playing with Armando Bacot. You're playing with Caleb Love. You're playing with RJ, why am I blanking on his name? You're RJ Davis. You know, you have talent around you. Leaky Black is a fourth, fifth-year senior that's going to help you out. And so if you were going to reclassify, it always seems like North Carolina was the spot. And if you went to South Carolina, wait a year and see if you can recruit guys around you. Like Cade Cunningham did, like whoever did. And so when I look at this situation, I wish him well. I really do. One thing I never do on this show, and anyone who listens to this show, who listens to any of my work, I do not tell people what to do. I do not claim to have all the answers. But I am a historian of college sports. I love this stuff. And I think what you're looking at is a couple things with Gigi Jackson. If he does ultimately commit to South Carolina, right now it's not official, but we know it's coming. At the very least, I just don't see the scenario where he wins very much, and it's cool to stay home, and it's cool to be the hometown hero, but winning is fun too, and I just don't think that anyone could step in there by themselves and have immediate success next year. The question becomes, does it hurt his draft stock? And I hope that it is at least a case like Markelle Fultz, like Ben Simmons, like Anthony Edwards, where it doesn't. But again, it's just a crazy story. And for the record, I know South Carolina fans are going to hear this. I'm not a UNC fan. I'm not, in the bag for them. I'm not rooting for them. But I root for all kids to be in the best position to succeed and put themselves in the best position to have long-term success. And I just don't know, as arriving in Columbia as a 17 to just turned 18-year-old, to be the face of a program that will be the worst program in the SEC is the best thing for him. And I hope I'm wrong. And by the way, I hope I'm wrong on this. We do a segment every week on this show called Where Aaron Was Right, Where Aaron Was Wrong. I hope I'm wrong on this, and I hope he has a great season. I just don't know if the people around him really care about what is best for him. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube channel. Also, make sure to download episodes of the Aaron Torres podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Thank you.